Peter, this we are going to look at the endgame between Vishy Anand and Magnus Carlsen. Right now, the position that we have on our board, what's happening?
Well, this is the conclusion of the game. We are not going to discuss what happened prior to that, but this is a position where we think Vishy missed a reasonably clear draw. Interestingly, Magnus actually had, I think, less time at this point. I think Magnus was consistently keeping his clock at around 15 to 20 seconds, and Vishy maybe had over a minute. I don't remember the clock situation exactly, but I'm pretty sure I'm not lying about this. And also, I want to apologize if some mistakes creep in. I had very little time to analyze this. It's a complicated endgame, and I hope I don't make too many incorrect statements about it. But Vishy here, knowing how cleanly he calculates, I have a feeling the fact that he is so good at chess actually let him down here, because he calculated a very long and a very brilliant line and thought he found a draw. And because he found such a brilliant draw, he did not make a draw he could have made much, much easier here, which is just simply give this check from f1. The king goes back to d3, we put the knight back on g3. And the point is, the only real plan of victory for black here is the push with b5, b4. But in order to push b5, b4 and have any progress, you need to have a king on d2, because otherwise white will, if you do this, for instance, white just parks his king on c1, and this pawn never promotes. Black doesn't have any pieces to attack the king on c1. Black doesn't have a dark square bishop or a knight. In fact, I think this position probably is winning for white now. So you need the king on d2, and this severely limits your winning options. So you just do this. If the king goes in this direction trying to attack the white king side, now we can come in with this sacrifice. And we get exactly the same position as in the game, but with the king on e3 instead of d2, which is a massive, massive deal. And I don't know if white is now winning or it's a draw, but black definitely is not playing this position for a win. This much we can say for sure. So Vishy could have just played knight f1 check, and I'm pretty sure he knew that this option exists and is probably quite good. But instead, I guess the combination of pressure, and also I honestly think he calculated this entire line to the end and missed just one minor detail. Vishy went with an attempt to make an immediate draw with this move. Magnus took, Vishy goes e6. The point here, of course, is that white has this passer on a7, and now the second one is running. So one of them will queen, because the bishop cannot keep both of them in check. But black, of course, has his own counterplay on the queen side. And now Vishy goes e7. This pawn takes here, and Vishy, very importantly, goes to a2, not a3, which at the time I was a bit surprised by, but he obviously has a very concrete idea in mind, because now he goes a8 queen, not this queen, because after this black has c4, c3, discovered check, and then puts the queen on the board, and that looks completely lost. But he puts this queen first.
This is where he smiled actually at Magnus.
And I think, honestly, we missed an opportunity to ask Magnus what happened there, because they exchanged this kind of a beaming smile, both of them. But I think both of them at this point realized what Vishy is intending. And it's such a moment of beauty that they're both artists. They both love the game absolutely. So the realization that this might be the end of the game just kind of tickled them both greatly. And the idea here is that after black takes and we put another queen on the board, now I actually, during the live show, I was making no sense whatsoever here, because I said, I don't understand what Magnus is thinking about, just put the queen on the board, we're winning. In fact, this is an immediate draw, because white goes queen e3 check, or e2, but it doesn't really matter much. And the point is, I can actually force you to take this queen. You can try avoiding it for a move, but I will continue chasing the black king, like this. And eventually you have to take. And despite white even having two pawns on the king side, this is just a stalemate, because this pawn, and we will return to this detail, this pawn is controlling the b3 square. And my guess is Vishy saw this when he was playing knight takes f5, and he thought he was making a draw. And instead of this, Magnus, who said in an interview that he knew that the match isn't going well and he knew he must continue the game, Magnus goes in with bishop b4, saying, I don't have to queen just yet. You can't actually touch this setup, and In fact, in particular, the pawn on f4 gets very much in the way of the checks that you can give to the black king on d2, which means that playing against the threat of c2, c1 queen is extremely difficult. But as far as I can work out, this is actually a mistake which throws the win away. But Magnus, I think, had once again 15 to 20 seconds here, and suggesting he should find the move c4, c3 here is a bit unfair.
It might also be tough in a classical game.
Yeah. Even with time to burn, maybe eventually you get there, and you can get there by reasoning, because the point this move is so strong is that the one idea you constantly have to fight against is the idea of stalemate. And by playing c4, c3, we are purposefully giving the white king the b3 square, so that there's never going to be a stalemate when we queen the c-pawn. And the variation could continue, queen d8 check, let's say king e1. And also, I think psychologically, you're very, very unused to the idea of the bishop this far away and the king on the other side of the board actually connecting eventually and preventing perpetuals. But prevent perpetuals they do. And in all of these positions, this just wins. The c-pawn will queen. And also, very, very importantly, we played c3. So this is just a threat. We can put the queen there and never have to worry about stalemates. And if after, let's say, in this position after king e1, if white takes, you can give a couple of checks. Let's say queen h1 and then queen g2, but the checks run out very, very quickly. This is just a completely lost position. So c3 would have won for Magnus, as far as I could tell in the very, very short time that I had to prepare for this video. But he played bishop e4, which I think is absolutely the human way of playing. And this is now a draw for a very, very specific reason. And Vishy came very close to working it out, actually. Vishy gave this check, bishop d3, and you don't actually have a perpetual here, because if you play queen a5 check, you get back to this situation where c3 and then c1 is happening. So you still have to play for stalemates. And Vishy correctly understood that, but he didn't anticipate the absolute brilliancy that happened on the next move. At this position, Anand plays queen d4, expecting the queen to be placed on the board, and now we play queen f2 check. I think it's important to play queen f2 check, by the way, because I think this is not a draw anymore. Because now you don't have queen c3, and the queen will come out via g2. But if you start with queen f2, now king c3, we can go back to d4. And after king c2, we can go to c3. It's very important to have access to this square. And if they play bishop e2, we can just go back to d4. And this appears to be a very stable perpetual
we can also
mechanism.
take the bishop, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Sorry, yeah. I kind of like the idea of, the stalemate involving even more pieces. I think so. From the aesthetical point of view, this is how I would like this to end. Like this.
Nice.
Absolutely assert dominance here with the move queen e2 check, but it's not important. Yeah. So Vishy saw this idea. Vishy was playing for this, but it turns out that the correct way of playing for this exact idea was to go here. And if c1 queen, we have the exact same check from f2. But the difference is what happened after queen d4. Because after queen d4, Magnus realizing what's happening, and on extremely low time, Magnus just played c1 knight check.
Wow.
And amazingly, this is now fast enough. Because after king a3, c3, it turns out that this setup, the knight will come out to e2. And if you look at this position, there are no squares on the board from which you can give checks to this king. And this pawn just queens. There is nothing you can do about it. You can play queen b4, I guess. But then eventually, I can maybe even go in this direction and then play bishop b4 and c3, c2.
Wow.
This setup is just extremely stable, and you can't fight against it.
You end up basically two pieces up.
Yeah. And Vishy sort of did the right thing now, but the problem is, in this position, he realized that when he goes queen c6, black can just put the queen on the board, take with the king, and after h6, it gets there. It gets there just in time. And this is why we have to come back to the position after bishop d3 and reevaluate our options. Knowing what we know about queen d4, c1 knight check, we go queen b6. This, as we've established, the queen is still a draw. So if black plays in a similar fashion, now in this position, we don't involve ourselves with checks at all. We have already taken on h6, which is one move faster than the previous variation. Knight e2, queen c6, c2, h6. And now if you put the queen on c1, this will also queen, because the bishop can't get there.
Wow.
And if you play knight c3, creating a threat of c1 queen check, we give a check from g2. And then, let's say after knight e2, white can even play for a win with a move like queen h1, which eventually forces you to put the queen here. We take, knight takes, h7, knight e2, h8 queen. For some reason, the evaluation on my phone screen was 0-50 here.
This should be a draw.
This might be a draw. For all we know, this might be a draw, but obviously Vishy would kind of welcome having to play this position, because occasionally you win. It's not so easy to hold these positions against the queen. All in all, this is just about the most study-like endgame I've seen in a proper game of chess in a long, long time. And to think that it was not just a random game of chess, it was a game of chess between Vishy and Magnus, which also decided the match between the two leaders of the first ever edition of the Global Chess League. This is some kind of a fairy tale stuff. I'm struggling to believe, honestly.
Well, thank you, Peter, for breaking it down. I think we understand this endgame slightly better.
And I'm saying this for myself, tiny bit better.
Thank you.